Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to call the May 7th meeting of the Common Council to order. I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Alderperson Haas.
Here.
Halverson.
Here.
Keene. Here. Novak. Here. Noling. Here. Rote.
Here.
Turner.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Grisham. Here. Grobe. Here. 10 present.
We have a quorum. Please rise if you are able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led this evening by Alderman Haas. Thank you. We will move to section D, and we have a presentation by the EPA consultants on lead service laterals.
Good evening. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me with the fancy technology in front of me. Okay. Thanks for having us. My name is Nick Cohen. I am an environmental planner with the Horsley Witten Group. We are technical assistance providers under the EPA Lead Service Line Accelerator Program, which is a program that we're working on with West Allis, as well as 10 other water systems throughout Wisconsin. I'm joined here tonight by my colleagues, Ryan Mitchell, Gabriella Spitzer, and Mark Briggs. And also tonight we have Casey Formal from EPA Region 5 in the Water Division Groundwater Drinking Water Branch in Chicago. I want to just emphasize before I get into the presentation that we are technical assistance providers. We're not ourselves EPA employees. So we're here to provide information and technical assistance to West Allis, and I'll be talking more about what our role entails in just a few minutes. Also tonight, I know there's several West Allis staff members in the audience, so they can answer questions about the specifics of the system or specific technical details. We're also available to answer questions afterwards as well. I'll just describe a bit more about what the Lead Service Line Replacement Accelerators Program is and then get into the presentation. I already mentioned it's a technical assistance program. It is to advance toward a goal of lead-free water and share information and best practices across Wisconsin, as well as best practices that can be applied throughout the nation. It doesn't impose any costs on water systems that are participating and doesn't impose additional regulatory requirements. Again, technical assistance and informational in nature. And again, the idea is to augment whatever West Allis might already have going on with other consultants or with municipal staff. And so our technical assistance can cover support for lead service line inventories, replacement planning, community engagement, and funding, all of which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. And we can support the water system with any of those topics where applicable, again, without trying to duplicate anything that's going on anyway. Before I jump in, one last caveat that many of the graphics and information in this presentation are from EPA and American Water Works resources. Those are generally publicly available, and so we can share that information with you all after if any specific requests or requests for additional information. Here's an overview of what I'll be talking about tonight. Give a bit of a background on the West Allis water system. I know several of you are new council members, so thought that might be helpful. Get into lead in drinking water and lead service lines just as a general topic, and then talk about lead service line replacement ordinances as a potential tool to address lead service lines. And these were topics that the West Allis staff that we've been working with thought might be of interest to you all. And then at the end, time for discussion and questions. And this is a conversation, so we're happy to take questions and come back or have other conversations via email or other presentations as needed. So just to provide a bit of background on the West Allis water system, it's part of the Public Works Department and provides water for a little over 60,000 people through 20,000 service connections. This water is purchased from Milwaukee, 5 million gallons a day roughly, and served through Milwaukee's system into the West Allis system through 2 interconnections, and then distributed through West Allis through approximately 215 miles of water main in West Allis. That's West Allis' own water system after receiving or purchasing that water from the city of Milwaukee. We're here to talk a little bit about lead. So an overview of water quality. Lead is not found in Milwaukee's source of public drinking water, but lead can enter water when service lines or plumbing fixtures like pipes or faucets or premise plumbing in someone's home corrode, and lead then gets into the water. I might use the term corrosion a few times tonight, and want to just reiterate or define that corrosion is dissolving or wearing away of metal caused by a chemical reaction between water and plumbing materials. And so that's often how we see lead getting into drinking water. And lead, accordingly, therefore, can enter drinking water as it travels through metal piping connecting the water main to the home. In a few slides, I'll be showing a diagram of how that system works. To try to combat this, Milwaukee adds a small amount of food-grade additive called an orthophosphate corrosion inhibitor. Don't have to remember that term. It's just a food-grade additive that is added to try to combat lead corrosion. And what that material does is it combines with the iron and creates a coating on the pipe to try to keep the lead in place or keep it from corroding into the water. West Allis's own tap sampling generally shows that this additive is working to keep lead levels below what are regulatory limits that are called action levels. So getting a little bit more into why we care about lead, generally there's health concerns, which I'll get to in a minute, and identifying service lines and working to replace them can help address health concerns. And then, of course, there's related regulatory requirements that exist at both the state and the federal level to try to address lead in drinking water. I'll take those topics kind of one at a time, but they certainly do relate. In terms of health, when people consume lead in drinking water, it can accumulate over time, resulting in damage to the brain, nervous system, red blood cells, and kidneys. And there are particularly sensitive populations, such as mothers, and mothers who have exposure to lead in the past can store lead in the bones and in their bones, and then release that lead during pregnancy and lactation. Young children are also considered vulnerable populations, as infants, fetuses, and young children appear to be particularly vulnerable to lead and harmful effects associated with lead, and their mental and physical and cerebral function can be affected long-term from exposure to lead. In this context, West Allis is following the EPA's requirements and working diligently to keep residents safe. There are still recommended best practices that residents can follow, such as regularly flushing pipes and using lead-removing filters if they suspect or if they do, in fact, have a lead pipe. We know West Allis is working diligently on their own efforts in the water system, as well as community engagement to get this information to customers. I think there might have been a flyer at the entrance with some of that information about what customers can do. The second piece of what I mentioned about concerns with lead is about regulatory requirements. These are largely driven by health considerations. As a quick overview, the primary way drinking water is regulated in the US is the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is at the federal level, and then that is implemented at the state level in Wisconsin through the Department of Natural Resources. And so the federal law sets the standards, and then at the state level it's implemented with specifics for each state. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the regulatory maximum contaminant level goal, or the standard, is 0, and that's because there's been determined that there's no safe level of lead. That's what the best science has shown to be the case. As part of that, in 1986, there were amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act, which banned the use of lead in service lines, and the effective date of that law, or that amendment, here in Wisconsin is also 1986, because Wisconsin adopted the federal standard by association, as many states did. We're currently operating under the 2021 lead and copper rule revisions, which require systems to prepare and maintain an inventory of all service lines by October 16th of this year. This is not an inventory of the premise plumbing or the plumbing in people's homes. It's the service line up to the meter in their home. And I have a diagram on the next slide that shows what that looks like. EPA is also currently harmonizing regulatory requirements with some of the unprecedented funding currently available under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to make progress on removing harmful lead from drinking water. And establishing an inventory is an important step in identifying where lead service lines are and then addressing these lead service lines. There is a current draft proposed rule out that is called the Lead and Copper Rule Improvements. It's proposed draft, but that proposed draft does have an annual requirement for lead service line replacements in it. It's likely that an annual requirement will be in whatever final rule is put out, but that is a draft proposed rule at this time. So again, part of the context for preparing for some of these issues going forward. Completing full replacements of both the public and the private side of the service line, and I have a diagram on the next slide of that, is considered a best practice, because leaving half a service line in with lead is still leaves exposure, and in fact, doing a partial replacement can disturb the lead that is in a service line and increase lead levels for a time after the partial replacement. At the state level, Wisconsin follows these federal drinking water regulations that I mentioned, and then has some of its own state requirements, such as through the Public Service Commission for requirements such as reporting lead service lines at the state level. So that's in addition to or on top of any federal requirements. So this is a diagram that shows your typical kind of water system. On the left, you can see there's a water main in the street, and it shows the pipes and other materials that connect to the home. So drinking water comes from a water main through a service line, which is the pipe between the blue pipe and the home, and that service line connects to the home via a meter. In West Allis, typically I believe the meters are in the home, but occasionally or other water systems, the meter might be in the street or near the sidewalk. And the service line is typically, and in West Allis this is the case, divided into what's called a public side and a private side. So the public side is in this graphic on the left and is the part owned by the city up to what's called the curb stop or curb box, which is a valve that can shut off water to a home. So that is the public side of the water service line up to that curb stop valve. And then on the other side is the private side of the service line, which is owned by the property owner, from that curb stop valve into the home up to the meter. Beyond that is labeled here as premise plumbing. That's your pipes in your home or faucets, and that's generally not the focus of what we're talking about tonight. That's past the service line. So tonight, and the inventory requirement and all the other topics we'll be talking about are focused on the service line itself. Lead is a pliable material that we find in older service lines, and that's generally why it was used, because of its pliability to connect from a main to a home, and they tend to be in older service lines. As with other areas with service lines around the country, in Wisconsin cities and towns that do have lead service lines have been found to be a significant source of lead when it is found in the blood of residents. Just getting into a bit more detail about what I was just talking about, here's the same graphic, and like I said, in West Allis, we have the public side of the service line between the water main and that curb stop valve, and then the private side of the service line between the curb stop valve and the home. These services here in West Allis can be made of copper, plastic, galvanized steel, or lead. And in West Allis, there are approximately 7,800 known lead service lines today. I'll show a graphic in a minute of where those might be. These generally are 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches in size. Anything above that is typically not lead and typically cast or ductile iron based on information available. Just to provide a little more context, there's an estimated 6 to 10 million lead service lines around the country, so not unique to West Allis or unique to Wisconsin by any means. A bit more detail on West Allis's own context. Using lead service lines and lead connectors was not uncommon here prior to World War II, and this is based on engineering records that the city has. And West Allis, based on those records, it's indicated that up until about 1953, lead service lines were used in parts of West Allis. In 1966, the plumbing code was changed so that lead was no longer an acceptable material for drinking water service lines. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, in 1986, EPA began requiring all service line pipe materials to be considered lead-free, and that same requirement was adopted here in Wisconsin the same year. So all these dates I just mentioned because that's the work that the West Allis employees are doing to go through the records to identify where remaining lead service lines are. And so using those dates and available records in the city, West Allis has identified the material used in more than 80% of their service lines. And so there's 20% remaining, and continuing to work to identify those 20% to identify the material of the remaining service lines that have not been identified. I'll just mention here a bit of a complicated nuance, which is that galvanized service lines that are or were downstream of lead are considered requiring replacement, and that's a kind of a regulatory phrase used because it's believed that those galvanized lines have the capacity to leach lead if they ever were downstream or are currently downstream of lead. So those are grouped into a slightly different category as galvanized requiring replacement, but also of concern for this effort. So here's a graphic from West Allis's information of where known lead service lines are in the city. I know it's a bit hard to read, but each dot, gray dot there is a lead service line identified based on current available information. In districts 1, 2, and 3 have the greatest concentration of lead service lines so far. These are the numbers so far for those different districts, and as I mentioned, West Allis staff is continuing to go through records and update these numbers on a regular basis, but this is the information as of today. As I said, districts 1, 2, and 3 tend to have the most lead service lines right now. So I've already mentioned a few times what West Allis is currently doing. A bit more detail on that. The staff is continuing to review remaining documents available in city records and engineering records to determine the service line materials for those remaining 1,000 or so service lines of unknown material. The inventory that I mentioned that has to be submitted by October 16th of this year is allowed to have service lines of unknown material. So you can submit the inventory and some service lines can be listed as unknown. That comes with additional regulatory requirements in terms of things like notification. So it's in the city's interest to reduce those unknowns as much as possible. And of course, a best practice to try to get as much information and identify the service line materials wherever possible anyway. West Allis is also developing a short and long-term plan for replacing lead service lines, and this is in part based on upcoming projects, such as any main replacements or other work to try to avoid disruptions and avoid long-term water shutoffs as much as possible. The city is also working on developing application to Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to obtain funding to pay for lead service line replacements, which I'll get to in the coming slides. And then also exploring and looking into the potential for a lead service line replacement ordinance, which would apply the authority to replace lead service lines in homes and commercial properties, and that helps to optimize DNR funding. So I'll focus on these next 2 points in the upcoming slides, and as I mentioned, happy to get into any more detail later tonight or subsequent presentations with any more detail. So starting with funding, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources administers what's called the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. This program is partially funded with an annual grant from EPA, along with repayments from past loans. And funding awards can be a combination of low-interest loans as well as principal forgiveness, which is a subsidy that does not need to be repaid. All funding in this program is provided on a reimbursement basis, so the work is done, reimbursement is applied for, and then paid once a reimbursement request is submitted. A full lead service line replacement is required for DNR funding, so I was referring to that a few minutes ago. So that means if both sides of the service line are lead, in order to be eligible for DNR funding, both sides of the lead need to come out, both sides of the service line. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, each state receives a dedicated grant each year from EPA to fund specifically lead service line replacement activities. This funding became available in 2022, and under current plans, DNR has that funding available through 2026 for public and private side lead service line replacements through 2026. Additionally, DNR, in collaboration with the Wisconsin Department of Administration and the Public Service Commission, has established the private lead service line replacement program to assist municipalities specifically with replacing private lead service lines. Some of the funding for this is awarded as principal forgiveness, which again is a subsidy that does not need to be repaid. Getting a bit more just into the details on DNR funding to give a sense of kind of the extent of it. In 2022, $48 million was available for lead service line replacements in the state. Following year, $81 million available. And eligible projects include, as I mentioned, public and private side lead service line replacements, as well as development support for that inventory that I mentioned is required by October 16th of 2024. I've already mentioned the principal forgiveness, which is a subsidy, and that's based on socioeconomic factors in the applying municipality. or it can also be done at a census tract level, and those same socioeconomic factors that DNR has established determine the level of principal forgiveness that may be available, either for an application municipality-wide or an application in a specific census tract or census tracts. And we've seen municipalities in Wisconsin follow both approaches, including in this year's funding. So I'll move on now to talk about ordinances, but we're happy to come back and give a very detailed funding discussion to the Common Council or other entities in the city, because this is just kind of the high level, and there's way more detail that we can talk about. So I mentioned a few times replacement ordinances. I'll take a step back and just define what an ordinance is. An ordinance is defined by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities as a local law of a municipality enacted by the proper authorities prescribing general, uniform, and permanent rules of conduct relating to the corporate powers of the municipality. So I know that's a mouthful. You all are probably familiar with ordinances like zoning or sanitation or the Common Council's own code of conduct. Things like that are usually laid out in ordinances. In terms of lead service line replacement ordinances, they typically require an owner or each owner of a property that is served by a private side water service line that has lead to replace that service line under certain conditions. And we see ordinances typically in municipalities have different levels of specificity about when that replacement must occur, how it must occur, coordination between the municipality and the customer, coordination among different entities, and the funding for how that plays out. And so these are definitely municipality-specific documents that can get developed. I'm going to go through some common questions about ordinances, but just pause to reiterate here that as EPA technical assistance contractors, not here to advocate for local policy and really just providing information for your own knowledge. A common question we get is, what are some of the benefits of lead service line replacement ordinances? So first, ordinances can address the issue of utilities' access to private property, including to inspect lead service lines or inspect service lines to determine their material. And so addressing these issues in an ordinance can help further identify service lines and then ultimately lead to their replacement. I've mentioned a few times partial replacements and challenges with those, and so an ordinance can help reduce partial replacements by requiring replacement of the entire lead service line. Unlike partial replacements, full replacements are best practice, and they're also required for DNR funding, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Ordinances can also establish a process for the identification of private lead service lines and then provide guidance for the timing of how those service line replacements need to be coordinated with public side replacements or any other work that might be going on. And then lastly, but certainly not least, one of the biggest drivers we see for lead service line replacement ordinances is related to funding. So on DNR, Department of Natural Resources funding applications, municipalities get an extra 10 points on their application if they have an ordinance in place. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail in a few minutes. In addition, if water systems are seeking approval from the Public Service Commission to use ratepayer funds to replace private service lines, and municipalities are allowed to use up to 50%, are allowed to use ratepayer funds to cover up to half the cost of a private side replacement. So if a municipality wants that approval from the PSC, an ordinance is required. From what we've talked about with West Allis, it sounds like going for that PSC approval is not of interest at this time, but it's important to just know that and keep that in mind. And for DNR funding, like I mentioned, having an ordinance gets a municipality an additional 10 points on their application. DNR has noted that ordinances are not required for their funding, but the words that we've heard them use in a few cases is that having an ordinance in place is highly recommended because it helps with the funding application. It also helps the municipality ensure that they are able to replace lead service lines when they do have funding for the private side. So it's highly recommended but not required as far as DNR has framed it. We've seen lead service line replacement ordinances in many communities across Wisconsin. Just to name a few, Milwaukee, Manitowoc, Oshkosh, Racine, Kenosha all have ordinances, and many others. And there's examples from throughout the state that are helpful to draw on just to see kind of what these documents look like. There's a variety of ordinance approaches and language and levels of detail in these ordinances, and typically they're tailored to the specific needs, processes, and approaches in a given municipality. Some of those topics are listed here on the slide. They might include deadlines, subsidies, financial assistance, triggers for the mandatory replacement, right of entry to a property, and any potential penalties that the municipality may want to impose for not replacing a lead service line. And so these are typically tailored to each municipality with different details or different language based on what that municipality wants to include. There are also state and federal requirements that municipalities typically are aware of and allude to in their ordinances. Typically what we see is references to these requirements, but not too many specific details because those requirements live and exist in other documents at the state and federal level. But municipalities often include information about notification to customers, timing of private lead service lines once the public side has been replaced, mitigation measures, and certain time frame for replacing the private side and how that works in coordination with the public side. There are specific regulatory requirements with each of these different components, and so obviously a municipality will want to tailor their ordinance to make sure that they're not inconsistent with federal requirements or state requirements with regard to topics like these. So some of these have flexibility, but some are mandated by federal or state requirements. I mentioned the DNR funding, so there's important timing considerations. If a municipality is applying for this fiscal year and wants to get those additional 10 points, the ordinance would need to be in place by June 30th of this year, and that would happen most likely again next year and be the requirement for funding applications. Again, not required for DNR funding. A municipality can apply for DNR funding without an ordinance, but DNR has said strongly recommended and again helps with those 10 additional points. One question that might come up is kind of how much of a difference does 10 points make? So it's difficult to sort of say year to year how that might change. For reference, projects this year for DNR scored between 189 and 299 points total. So you can see that 10 points makes a difference, but it's not half of that value. There were some projects that were ranked, and the difference between them was as little as 1 point. So it could make a difference. It doesn't necessarily affect the amount of principal forgiveness that's received. That's determined by the socioeconomic factors that I mentioned a few minutes ago, but it determines the ranking of the projects in DNR's funding list and the availability of different funding terms that DNR goes into. So it's a very complicated process that the state and all states have. We can come back and talk more about that in more detail if that would be of interest. And then lastly, municipalities typically include different levels of funding detail in their ordinances. We know, and we've heard from municipalities all over Wisconsin, that funding is a challenge with lead service line replacements, and so municipalities typically reference their funding and their financing plans in their ordinances, but those are typically decisions that need to be made in general and in a much more comprehensive way. Certainly up to each municipality to determine how they're going to approach funding and financing. The DNR Safe Drinking Water Loan Program that I mentioned and bipartisan infrastructure law funding are just two examples of funding. Community development block grants, as an example, are other funding source for lead service line replacements, and each municipality that we've talked to and heard from is kind of tailoring their funding approach based on their own needs and their own conditions. With that, I'll open it up to questions. Happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, we have colleagues from EPA as well as the city who can answer questions depending on what you might have. And I'll just reiterate that we're here as technical assistance providers to hopefully provide information and technical support to the city, so can answer any questions that we can or pass questions on to others who may be better equipped to answer those. And again, not to advocate for local policy. Those are ultimately decisions that West Allis would have to make. Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions from the council? Their brains are full. All right. Thanks for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And I promised I would return the settings to the previous AV, so I'm just going to do that, and then I'll get it.
And as you do that, I will ask the clerk to start to read out number 2, very slowly.
This is an update from the assessor's office on the 2024 citywide revaluation.
Thank you.
Ready?
We're ready.
All right, good evening. I'm Jason Williams, City Assessor. I came before the council on April 23rd and I gave a detailed presentation on the citywide revaluation. So tonight's presentation is in two parts. One is to address some of the most common questions we've received in the last few weeks. And then the second part will go into the impact on the tax bill and how that process will play out through the year. And we'll have a timeline to help people better understand what to expect going forward. One of the most common questions we received was, why did the value go up so much? And some people went up 80%, 60%, 30%. It varies from property to property, area of the city, depending on where you are. So on the assessment notice, you would have seen a 2023 value, and then you would have seen a 2024 value. But the residential values haven't been updated since 2013, so 11 years ago. So that big jump is playing catch up for 11 years. So it's not an increase from 23 to 24, it's really an increase from 2013 to 2024. The exception to that is if owners had renovations or upgrades or additions, things like that, then they would have seen that placed on their record in the year they did that work, and then they would have gotten a new value to reflect that. The other common question we got was, why does the assessment notice have the word improvements? I didn't do any work in my house. I think this is real estate appraisal jargon. So you have land, and that's your parcel, and then whatever improvements to that land is called an improvement. So that would be a house, an office building, a parking lot, a garage. If a person did any kind of upgrades or renovations, that would have been called out separately on that notice. So you would have seen land and improvements, and next to that, revalue. So what that is saying is that the price or the value increase is due to the revaluation. But anyone who did like a kitchen remodel, that would have been on there as well, because only a portion of the increase is for that work. The rest of it was the revaluation. We'll look at maybe changing that word going forward, so it's more clear. The other question we received was, well, how did you come up with these values? And so the first thing we did is we updated land values. For the first time in recent years, we saw a lot of residential lot sales. For many years, these vacant lots had sat there. There wasn't a market to sell them and have people build new. In recent years, those lots have sold, and you have seen new homes being constructed in West Allis. The sale of those lots gave us really good current data as to what people are willing to pay for land in West Allis. So we updated the residential land values to reflect this current, more recent activity. We also saw that on the commercial side. We had commercial land sales. So that was the first step. The second step is we updated the cost manuals used to place an initial value on structures like the house, the garage, decks, porches, things like that. The cost manuals that are used come from a national database that is modified to local costs. It's the same cost manual that insurance companies use, that real estate appraisers use, and the Department of Revenue, State Department of Revenue, has a contract with this company. It's CoreLogic. You may have heard it described as Marshall and Swift. So that cost data on how to value structures, like the difference between vinyl siding and brick, number of bathrooms, square footage, story height, is it a ranch or a two-story? All of those things are costed. So at that point, you now have a raw value. You have land and the cost to build a structure. The next step is to then equate that to the current market. And you do that by reviewing neighborhood sales. The neighborhood sales will tell you where the market is. So in the case of recent years, the market has gone up considerably. So we then had to take those raw values of land and improvements or the structures and raise that to get it to market levels. In 2013, the market had declined, so the values were brought down from that raw value, as an example. So that's the first part. Those were the most common questions. The most common question is coming up. Last week we held a series of listening sessions. This was held Monday through Friday from 12 to 1, where people came into the council chambers and a presentation similar to what I'm saying to you tonight was presented to them. And then they had an opportunity to meet with staff to talk about their property and ask us any questions they may have had. So that was Monday through Friday during the day, and then we had 2 evening sessions, Wednesday and Thursday. We had, I believe, 132 that attended those sessions. This week is open book. So this was the open book that was put into the notice. It's being held May 6th through May 10th. So this Friday is May 10th. So far, we have 200 open book appointments scheduled for this week. Today is the completion of day 2. So when people come to an open book appointment, what they can expect is to sit down with staff, and the first thing we're going to do is review the property record card. And so what that is a description of your property. You would expect to see that it would be, say, a 1-story ranch with brick facade, 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, built in 1958. And then we are going to ask questions about when has it been updated? Is there anything missing? We'll verify that, there's an AC or not, things like that. One thing that's helpful for us is if you brought pictures of anything you want to show us, and we can review that and talk to you about that. The next thing we'll talk to people about is the valuation process. What I just went through with the cost manual, the land value, and the neighborhood sales. And then we'll show people the sales that were used to calculate these market factors. I'll go back. No, I'll come back to that comment. So all together, we've had over 1,100 calls and emails that have come into the assessor's office. They're starting to come down. Yesterday we had 43, and today I believe we had 39. The customer service center is receiving most of these calls and processing. They're logging them so that we have a log of who called, when, was it an email, a voicemail, and they're using that to follow up. We have not been able to respond to everyone that has reached out to us because of the volume. Before I walked into this meeting, there were 39 messages that have not been gotten back to. So we've gotten it down. The hope is to clear that this week and have it to be 0. We will respond to everyone that has reached out to us. To put this into perspective, There's nearly 20,000 properties, and if you count up these inquiries, it's about 5% of property owners. So one thing, going back to the previous slide, the whole purpose of Open Book is not to appeal the value. It's to meet with the assessor's staff and fix errors and make corrections to the record. So it's not a place to come and negotiate a value. What we're really trying to accomplish is that we have a correct property record card. The process to appeal the value is held at board of review. And I'll go into that now and explain a little bit about that. But first, you know, the number one question, how will this affect the tax bill? I went into this in great detail on the April 23rd meeting, so I will gloss over some of those details. But as a reminder, the total levy will not be known until December, and that is a key number to calculate the tax rate. And that includes the 5 taxing jurisdictions: the city, the school, the county, MATC, and MMSD. So on the residential side, the average increase was 58%. And that's an average, so you have highs, numbers above that, below that, and that's the average. The reason why some owners went up more than others goes back to the variability between property types. You know, the brick versus the vinyl side by side, things like that. We've seen a lot of, you know, people have come in and wanted to know why the neighbor was lower. We looked at their record. Well, they didn't have AC. AC adds a significant value to a home. That's just an example of one property and one neighbor that came in. It could be varied, the reasons. So one question that was brought to our attention is, why is this being done now and not closer to when the tax bills are issued? And I'm going to give you the short answer, and then I'll kind of work that into a longer answer. The short answer is it's mandated by state law. Okay? So the Board of Review is a quasi-judicial board meant to provide the ability for a property owner to appeal their assessed value. So it starts with the Board of Review. It's a right of a property owner to disagree with the value and appeal it. So it starts with that. Within 45 days of the 4th Monday in April, the Board of Review must be held. So for 2024, that would be June 6th. From that date, you go back at least 30 days, and that's when you must notice the public. So I started with June 6th, and then I figured with it being a revaluation, we want to have at least 3 weeks for hearings. Normally, we would have maybe 2 days in a non-reval year, so 3 weeks. So I went back 3 weeks. That got us to May 22nd, and then I went back 30 days, and that date was April 22nd, but then I went back to the Friday before, and that's how we came up with April 19th. These last 3 points, I'm going to skip here, but I'm going to talk about it on the next slide. So I'll just leave that up if anyone wants to read it. So here we have the annual process, and this is done statewide. It's not unique to West Allis. You'll find these dates throughout the entire state. So we have the Board of Review on May 22nd, and the notices, we just covered that. At Once the Board of Review adjourns, that process is complete and it ends. And property owners can no longer appeal their value once the Board of Review adjourns. By June 10th, local assessors must report all of the assessed value to the state. So that's the end date for assessors. We get the Board of Review done, we adjourn, and then we report the values, and then we begin next year's work. I don't have this on the slide, but what I'll add is that during the summer months is when these taxing jurisdictions will begin the budget process at an administrative level. So here in West Allis, the city administrator will ask the department heads, begin putting your budgets together and get it to us by this date. And that's usually in August. By the time we get to the early fall, the budget for the city at least has been coming together. There's been discussions, there's been meetings, there's been committee meetings, and then you then present that to the public. So for West Allis, on November 12th is the public hearing for the city budget, and then the Common Council will act on that November 19th. Running subsequently to this process, you have the 4 other taxing jurisdictions going through a very similar process. They're bringing their budgets together, they're reviewing them, and then they are presenting them to the public for public feedback, and then ultimately the board or the elected officials will vote on that. Then that brings us to late November, early December. All of those budgets and ultimately the total levy are certified and brought together, and now that number is known. So you have the total assessed value from, well, one other thing is November 1st is when the manufacturing values are added to the total assessed value. So by early December, you now have all the numbers you need to calculate the tax rate and then ultimately the tax bill. So one thing I would add is going back to the question, why isn't it done closer together? Well, at some point, the state of Wisconsin decided that that was not fair to taxpayers to give them the value and then the tax bill amount around the same time. It's more fair, according to state law, and the history of this, is that earlier in the year, you set the value on January 1st, and then in the spring, you present the value to the owner. You give them time to react, and that's the 30-day notice. And then you provide the process to appeal that value. Then that process, that part of the component is now done. And then you begin the budgeting process, and then again, you open it to the public for feedback and input through the public hearings. And now you've had more time to review the budget and come to a conclusion and a vote on that. So it's really designed to separate the two components of this so that there's time given to the public. And then finally, in December, the tax bill is calculated and sent out to the property owners. So that is the conclusion of this night's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any questions from the council? All right. Thank you very much. So we are going to move on to Part E, which is public hearings this evening, and we are going to go slightly out of order. Our fourth item, number 4, will be presented by our city engineer, Melinda Dieskey, and then after that, we're going to have just plenty of Steve chair. So. Yeah, probably should. I will now ask clerk to read out public hearing number 4.
Resolution to confirm and adopt the report of the city engineer containing the schedule of proposed assessments for improvement of various streets by concrete reconstruction.
Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My name is Melinda Dieskey. I'm the city engineer for the city of West Allis. With me tonight is Rob Hutter, who is the assistant city engineer, and we're here to talk about the public hearing for the road reconstruction of South 118th Street. We are looking at South 118th Street between West Rainbow Avenue and West Washington Street. The procedure for tonight's public hearing on the road project is we'll describe the project scope and the costs, the assessment rates and the methods that we use to determine those special assessments. We will take comments and questions from the Common Council and the citizens that are affected. The public hearing then gets closed, and the project is referred to the Public Works Committee for discussion and vote by the committee, and then that recommendation comes back to the full Common Council for a final determination. So how was 118th Street chosen to be reconstructed or resurfaced this year? The city is required by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to rate each road in the entire city every 2 years on a scale of 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And then we report those back to DOT. Since 2010, the share of the roads in excellent condition have fallen by 9.5% statewide. Conversely, roads in poor condition or very poor condition have increased by 2.7% statewide. For West Allis, 1/5 of its roads are in poor or very poor condition, and 118th Street is rated 3 out of 10. So it's in that poor, very poor category. Here's some examples of 118th Street. We see severe pavement deformation. That would be like, you can see there's like evidence of ponding water here. Yep. There's some addition, some settlement here. There's severe cracking in the street. 118th Street also in the parking lanes, kind of like a roller coaster. So, and that's due to some poor soils underneath there. So we really need to get that taken care of to make the street safe for everybody to use. So under underground conditions, we will be putting in new water main in this street. The existing water main is from the 1960s, but it has numerous breaks. So we need to replace that. We will be doing new copper or HDPE pipe, and the service lines will be replaced, the public portion, which we don't have any lead service lines out here, so but you understand where that conversation goes from the lead service line presentation earlier. We'll be doing new sanitary laterals installed to each property. We'll be putting in a storm under drain underneath the curb area to drain the gravel under the road. We're going to put a special fabric called GeoGrid. Because of those poor soils, we're putting that in to keep those poor soils from migrating into the gravel that is underneath the road. And we're going to put a little extra stone to make sure that it's not going to sink anymore. So the estimated costs for this project are $1,290,000. You can see the breakdown by pavement, sewer, storm sewer, and water main. Here's a visual representation of that. As you can see, the special assessments are we're collecting about $125,000 out of the $1.29 million of the project. So here's an example of a special assessment for a residential property. The average lot width is about 55 feet. The assessment rate per lineal foot of front foot property is $68.31. So that cost for the street would be $3,757.05. Then everybody has a driveway approach. So we use a rate of $8.53 per square foot for the concrete driveway replacement, if that's needed. And then those two costs added together would be the total cost for the special assessment. Bills for the special assessment, if the project moves forward, would not be mailed out for, until spring of 2025. We have to make sure that we bill for what we put in front of the property, what the driveway approach actually is installed. The city of West Allis does have payment options. You can do a lump sum payment, a 5-year installment plan, or a 10-year installment plan. But there is interest on the unpaid balance for the special assessments. An example of a payment plan, if you do a 10-year payment plan, your first year would be $506, and the 10th year would be like $376.
Melinda, can you check your microphone and see it's blinking? Sometimes they reset.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You don't want me to rewind all the way, do you? Oh, okay. So, just so everybody understands, the interest rate that the city has to borrow money for these projects, so the interest rate we charge on the special assessments is what we basically are charged for the loan, so we are making no money on these projects. It's a lot of words on the slide, so I'll try to keep it kind of brief, but why do we special assess? So in Wisconsin, state statutes allow municipalities to do so. Every community in Milwaukee County has a special assessment ordinance, so they all can do it. Every community except for Shorewood, and they just quit 2 years ago. It's done, it's back now. We're gonna trade? Okay. Oh, okay, thank you. We'll keep going. In Milwaukee County, each community special assesses, except for Shorewood, who quit 2 years ago, but they all can special assess something. A road, sewer main, water main, just sidewalk. Brown Deer special assesses their street lighting. And like Greendale special assesses drainage projects. So each community special assesses something. A lot of them special assess roads like West Allis does. Across the state, many communities use special assessments to pay for capital improvement projects. Some examples are cities of Pewaukee, Madison, Rice Lake, Eau Claire, Green Bay, Oconto, and Platteville. So across the state, people are using special assessments. And it's been used in Wisconsin for over 110 years. And judges have upheld this policy in state statute for many, many years. And so it's a very proven method to recoup for cities and villages and towns to recoup costs on projects. In West Allis has also used it for over 110 years. In the past, property owners paid up to 100%, which is not the case today. The city-funded projects on this project, the city will collect $125,000, which is less than 10% of the project cost. The assessment rate, as we went over, is $68.31 per linear foot for residential properties, and that is regardless of how wide your street is, how much traffic is on your street, what the bid prices come in at. That is a fixed rate that is set every year by the Common Council. Every residential property is treated equally. And then businesses, corporations, and manufacturers actually pay a higher assessment rate to make sure that they contribute their fair share, and their assessment rate is $85.38 to $102.46 per foot. Lastly, we special assess also because it is the only way to ensure that tax-exempt properties like schools and churches and hospitals and county parks and railroads pay their fair share too. No property is exempt from special assessments. We have 430 properties in the city that don't pay any property taxes, so this is how these properties pay their fair share. And So again, many of these tax exempt schools, churches, hospitals, county parks are very large properties, so it's, even though it's 430 properties, it takes up 28% of the land value, the land of the city. And again, the only way we get that back is by doing a special assessment. So for the schedule of this project, we designed the project. If this project moves forward, we'll go out to bid. And the construction will be later summer, start in the later summer, and go over the fall with it being completed around late October, early November. And we will send out notices to all the residents when the project's going to start, with all the information about who the inspector is, how to contact us, and what they can expect from the project. One of the best ways to stay up to date, though, is to sign up for the construction in progress report emails that Rob actually generates for us later at the end of the week. You go to the city website and you can get text notices or emails. We do a project summary at the end of every week, and we send that out to everybody who has signed up. And with that, we conclude our report.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions from the council on this public hearing? I see Alderman Haas has got his light on.
I'm all ready, Mayor Devine.
Let's roll.
Thank you. So I have two questions, Melinda. Number one, typically when we have a concrete street, the interim repair would be to do an asphalt resurfacing. With this, we're taking a concrete street, we're tearing it up, putting another concrete street in, and that's a little bit more expensive than the asphalt resurfacing. Why is the proposal to do another concrete street?
The soil is so poor underneath here that if we were just to put the asphalt overlay, it would last maybe 2 years, and that would not be effective use of everybody's money, the city's nor the residents' money. So this is the way because we have to take a lot of that bad soil away.
And then my second question is sidewalks.
I'm glad you brought it up. I finished and I was like, I should have said something else. There are no sidewalks going in on this project.
Okay, and there is no plan to do any grading for sidewalks either, or that won't be done?
We are going to install a sidewalk section in the driveways because we have to grade the driveways anyway. We've looked at the plans, we've figured out where they would go and kind of where they should be, and but we're not really grading for the sidewalks. But we know where they would go. We've planned for it, and if it ever would come forward. Since we're doing the driveways, the other reason we're putting the sidewalk section in the driveway is because when we would come back with sidewalk, it'd be a sidewalk-only project potentially, and that way we won't have to dig up anybody's driveway and inconvenience them, and it's a cost savings measure, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Haas. Any other questions from the
Mayor
council?
Devine?
Alderwoman Grisham.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to this because obviously Greenville Gardens was our district, Dana, Alderwoman Keenan, mine prior to this past election. And I know that this was brought before our Public Works Committee too. Were any of the neighbors notified on that regrading or preparing the sidewalks as discussed in Public Works? I think we believe the direction that you asked at that time when we were discussing sidewalks is that we were going to take a survey of each individual property owner
We did.
and ask if they want the sidewalks and/or the regrading, because I think there were two
did.
parts to that. So was there actual communications with any of the residents?
We had sent out a survey back when we had brought it before the Board of Public Works, so.
Okay, so each project, as stated before, upcoming projects here forward, those property owners will be notified in advance to ask if they want the regrading, if they
there's
want
no
the
sidewalk,
sidewalks. Okay.
Yep.
Part two, I believe this wouldn't have any impact on any of the landscaping or otherwise when it comes to those approaches?
In the approach, the approach is concrete, so.
Right.
There's one property that has some brick work that is in the right-of-way. And so we'll be working with that property owner. We'll salvage what we can. We'll put it back on their property, and then they can reinstall that then in the back, in the right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, are there any members of the audience with questions on public hearing number 4? If you do have questions, we're going to ask you to approach the podium and please sign in either before or after your comments. And then also please give us your name and address just so we have it for our official record. Thanks, Kale.
Dennis Pomeroy. I live at 1202 South 118th Street. I got my assessment or whatever estimate, and it's different by 20 square feet from everybody else. I measured my approach. My approach is within inches of everybody else. How come I'm paying for 20 square feet more?
We'd have to look at that specifically. I can't address that right now. If you, we can get your name and number after the hearing, and then we can set up an appointment where we can talk to you.
Well,
There might be something else on your property that,
there's 4 or 5 people on my street. Everybody kind of talks. They're all different prices.
well, the approaches are all slightly different sizes. And we might
Approaches are
have
all
to.
within inches.
Okay, we could, again, we can try to meet after, after the hearing, you get your name and number, and try to schedule an appointment with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on public hearing number 4?
I have 2 questions.
Could you give us your name and address,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. My
That's
name
okay.
is Tracy Schley. My address is 11729 West Madison Street. Actually, my first one is just a statement. It's almost $9,000. Add 4% on that, I simply don't have it. But my second concern is, I'm an insurance agent. And I have customers that call me because they have their homes, which are older. This is an older subdivision or neighborhood. And all the pounding on the street can cause foundation issues, cracking, so on and so forth. That's something that homeowners insurance doesn't cover. I don't care where it is or what it is, it doesn't cover it. What do we do in situations like that? My home was built in 1952.
We haven't seen historically where the regrading of the street has impacted foundations. So
The pounding of the concrete?
we're going to be removing all the concrete.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, the pounding of the concrete to get it removed. I mean, I've seen it, in the
Well,
25 years, I've seen it.
All I can tell you is what our experience has been, that is not, the removal of the concrete has not impacted foundations.
Then I guess I have nothing, because
Just
We-
one
we-
item, since that's on the agenda. I had my street done 3 years ago, right during COVID. My house was built in 1928, and I didn't have any issues.
well, no, I'm not saying that everybody's gonna have an issue based on their edge of the home. I'm just saying it's a possibility, and I know because of that possibility, it worries me because I see and I know it's not something that's covered. So in addition, if something would happen like that to my situation, where I'm a single mom homeowner, on top of the almost $9,000 I'm gonna be assessed with 4% interest, because I won't be able to come up with that with my property taxes or by my property taxes. If I have to cover some kind of issue that comes along to my house because of that, then what? I'm just expressing my concerns
Yeah.
being in that neighborhood. I just.
I was just trying to reassure a little bit. I went through it for
Well,
my
yeah,
son.
I understand what you do. I do understand that, and I appreciate that. It's just that I see it more than once, you know, and it's just a concern. I mean, I know I don't have anything, or I couldn't buy anything that would cover a situation like that. And it would financially really cause me a burden, especially knowing the amount of money I would have to come up with to cover, because my assessment was almost $9,000. So, and again, add interest onto that, because there's no way I can pay that when they want it in full. You know, I pay my property taxes, but that's not gonna help me.
I would also recommend that if by some chance something like that does happen, I would think you would need to reach out to the contractor who did the work on the road to file a complaint with them.
Yeah, that goes nowhere. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience on a public hearing number 4? All right, seeing nobody, we will close our public hearing number 4. And we will back up now to item 3. And I will ask the clerk to read out public hearing number 3, please.
Ordinance to amend zoning code to prohibit the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Here we go. Next time. Well, thanks for bearing with me here. Our first hearing here is for the dogs and cats, the ordinance, and my name is Steve Scher, the manager of planning and zoning. And this ordinance is a spin-off of one that was passed last year, which basically established some new definitions and regulations on animal boarding, breeding, sheltering of animals. And this ordinance is being proposed and sponsored as with an animal welfare and humane treatment basis, basically prohibiting the sale for new businesses that may wish to start in West Allis, prohibiting animal sales for dogs, rabbits, and cats. The Humane Society Milwaukee-Matic advocate against animal mills, mass breeding operations, which are designed for compensation. Our Plan Commission took a stance on this and recommended approval of the ordinance. Of course, this requires a public hearing before the City's Council, and that's the purpose for this hearing this evening. So the ordinance itself that's been crafted establishes first a definition, which reads as the retail sale of dog, cat, rabbit, except any sale by a person who is also using the same lot as an animal shelter. And then you can see across the principal use table on the right here, animal sales are not allowed in any of the zoning districts within the city. So basically updating the principal use table to express that prohibition by these empty cells, which would normally either have a P for permitted or a C for conditional use or an L for limited use. In this case, any new pet store that sells dogs, cats, or rabbits would not be allowed. The existing stores within the city are considered legacy uses, would be allowed to continue. So Plan Commission has recommended approval, and it's just, I guess, before council this evening for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Alderman Haas kicking it off once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Devine. And so, Steve, how about dog breeders? Dog breeders, well, just, that's my question to start out with. How about dog breeders?
Well, dog breed, like I think we have one, pet store on 83rd and Lincoln, and breeding is not allowed in the city either. So if you currently have a store that breeds animals, I guess you'd be considered a legacy use. However, again, if you're someone new to the city that's looking to start up a business, breeding or selling dogs, cats, or rabbits, they would be considered not allowed at all.
And I think that how this works in practice is a dog breeder, animal breeder typically works out of their home. It's their own cottage business oftentimes, and as opposed to having a brick and mortar store where they're selling animals. This addresses brick and mortar stores where you're selling animals versus if a person wishes to sell a litter of puppies that they have, they can still do that.
This would still apply. The restriction would actually apply to a residential situation as well. Now, there could be the situation where your dog gets pregnant and has babies. I mean, that's different. I think there's an understanding, there's a reasonable understanding for that situation. However, if there's a routine with puppies for sale, kittens for sale, and it happens to be at the same address routinely every so many months, that could be a situation where the city could step in and say that you cannot sell dogs, cats, or rabbits for compensation out of your residential home.
Okay, I guess I'm concerned about that, I was hoping that there would be a line where we're allowing dog breeders, but still not allowing any new brick and mortar animal stores. And maybe that's something for discussion in our committee meetings. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Haas. Any other questions from the council?
Mayor Devine.
Oh.
Go ahead.
All right, Alderperson Grisham.
Thank you. There was thoughtful consideration going into this amendment, so first I want to thank you and your department for looking into this and that we sponsored this, because one of the reasons, which you've already stated, is not only brick and mortars, but there are residential properties that produce animals that are unhealthy. They create puppy mills. We're not discovering them in our municipality per se, but there are puppy mills that farm out these animals and feed them into these stores. They could be being fed into homes, because since we have modified our home occupancy type of standards throughout the city, which I believe Alderman Haas, you remember we had that conversation last year, these types of business are now umbrellaed into residential areas. So we have to be mindful, because most of us here are animal lovers, and this is the purpose, is to protect not only the animals from cruelty, but people who are buying these animals that have health issues and are burdened by that. So I thank you for doing the amendment. I just wanted to make sure if there's conversation in that area of residential or breeders, we can visit the conversation, but I think it was on a broader scale, so I don't know if an additional amendment can be put in there, but you never know what's going on in someone's backyard, and I'd like to prevent any animals from being abused. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Novak.
Thank you. So my question would be, for the buildings that are considered legacy use buildings, if they transfer ownership, are they still going to fall under that legacy use if they're doing the same type of business?
Yes, that would be the case. And as long as there's not lapse, so if there's a lapse of over 12 months, then they would have to comply with the current ordinance, which there would be a situation there where it wouldn't be allowed. So as long as there's no lapse, that less than 12 months, it would transfer over.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council?
Mayor Devine, I have one more question. Oh, Kimberly, you go right ahead.
Alderwoman Grobe.
Sorry. I'm just wondering whether or not this ordinance would have any effect on potential pet or animal shelters that set up in West Allis, or would this fall under this, or would that be considered something different than sale if it was like cat shelter or a rehoming kind of situation?
Yeah, so actually the previous ordinance update that we did in '23 actually allows shelters in limited situations in industrial districts, as long as it's a nonprofit organization, so like MADIC or Humane Society, those types of establishments are allowed. There's a place for them, and they're allowed within the city to shelter, as well as, I think you have to purchase a dog or a cat or whatever they have, the rescue. So that there is an allowance for that within the zoning code, and this is primarily for compensation. This is where this definition is a little bit different from that other one, where it's just an outright ban for animal sales for compensation.
Okay, so like adoption fees or things like that wouldn't fall into sale then?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Grisham.
Yes, I just want to kind of go back to the home occupancy permits, and I wanted to ask Cale Decker, did we have that breeder occupation in the permittable? Do you remember? That was just one question I have, because I don't think we did, and I think this falls differently under like a fancier's permit, Because I don't believe we had breeding as a permittable home occupation. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yep.
So thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right, seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the members of the audience?
Hi, my name is Molly Weinfurter. My address is 1105 South 117th Street in West Dallas. I'm speaking in support of the Humane Pet Store Ordinance, which would prohibit new businesses in West Dallas from selling dogs, cats, and rabbits from mills. West Dallas would not be alone in passing this ordinance. 13 other localities in Wisconsin have already passed it, including Wauwatosa, Waukesha, and Pewaukee. This is in addition to 493 localities in 7 states across the country, including the state of Illinois. Publicly available records show that the majority of pet store puppies come from puppy mills, which are breeding facilities where profit is put above the well-being of the dogs. Dogs in puppy mills are often confined to small cages their whole lives, receive little to no veterinary care, are deprived of human companionship, and are forced to breed repeatedly. I have fostered and adopted dogs that were rescued from puppy mills, so I've seen firsthand how traumatized these dogs are. Many of them are too scared to be touched or even leave their crates. Not only are puppy mills terrible for the animals, but they also have negative effects on the public. Pet store puppies are often sick because they're born in unsanitary conditions, taken from their mothers too soon, and shipped to faraway pet stores. Many customers of these puppy stores have no idea that they're supporting a puppy mill, and it's devastating for the families to buy a puppy only to find out that the puppy is severely sick later on. Some of the diseases that pet store puppies could carry can spread to both animals and humans. Puppy selling stores are harmful for both animals and people in the community, so West Allis should not allow these types of businesses to open. This ordinance wouldn't prevent anyone in the community from getting a puppy. There are lots of puppies available at shelters, rescues, and reputable breeders nearby. Even though this ordinance won't affect existing businesses, passing it is crucial for keeping new puppy selling businesses out of West Dallas. There have already been some puppy stores moving into Wisconsin after the Illinois statewide ban, so this ordinance would prevent them from opening in our community. It's important to note that this ordinance would not stop pet stores from selling supplies. Pet supply stores are very beneficial for pet owners, and they can succeed without selling puppies. Please consider passing a humane pet store ordinance in West Dallas to ensure that our community isn't supporting the cruelty that puppy mills cause. There is a representative from Bailing Out Benji attending this meeting who can answer questions about this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Hello, my name is Donna Stroh, and I live at 11229 West National Avenue in West Dallas. I'm here tonight to ask you to pass an ordinance that would prohibit any new pet stores in our community from selling dogs and cats. I frequently volunteer with an organization called Bailing Out Benji. They're a nonprofit dedicated to education and raising awareness of puppy mills and their connection to pet stores. They do this by collecting thousands of certificates of veterinary inspection, also called CVISs. These records are obtained directly from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture. The CVIs provide documentation on where the puppies are coming from and where they are going. Research shows that Wisconsin pet stores are obtaining puppies from 8 different states besides Wisconsin, 2 of which are home to some of the world's worst puppy mills in the nation. That's Missouri and Iowa. As you may already know, a puppy mill is a commercial dog breeding operation where the breeder puts profits over the welfare of the parent dogs. In puppy mills, dogs live in small cages with wire bottom flooring and are bred repeatedly. These dogs rarely receive vet care or proper nutrition you and I would provide our dogs. Implementing this ordinance will also protect West Allis consumers. Besides sourcing dogs from inhumane mills, pet stores offer financing or applying for in-store credit card to purchase a puppy. An additional financial burden often comes when pet store puppies are sick. Far too many people have heartbreaking stories of puppies who have died shortly after purchase, had lifelong genetic disorders, or illnesses costing thousands of dollars in veterinary bills. It's too late when they realize the limits of the pet store warranty. I want to thank you for considering this ordinance. Passing it will send a message that our community doesn't support this cruel industry and will also protect its residents from predatory lending and the financial and emotional hardship that comes with that pet store puppy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to address the council under this public hearing? All right. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Item number 3, public hearing number 1. And we will move on to number 5, and I'll ask the clerk to read that out.
Conditional use permit for Tsunami Express Car Wash, a proposed car wash with accessory drive-through service at 10928 West Oklahoma Avenue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. The proposed, or the existing Incrediroll site on 109th in Oklahoma is being sold to Tsunami. They have been offered to purchase. The property is Zone C4 commercial, which does allow car washes as a conditional use permit, so the purpose for this hearing. The hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. They operate typically with about up to 3 employees on site, and the next shows the overall site plan. The car wash building will be located lengthwise along Oklahoma Avenue. 2 of the some of the driveways along Oklahoma Avenue will be consolidated into one driveway, as shown on the site plan just east of the building, and then the traffic flow will wrap around the site. The point of sale here being on the northwest side of the site, where one can either enter the vacuum area behind the building or directly into the car wash and then come back out and vacuum afterward. There are roughly about 28 vacuum sites as well as employee parking within the central portion of the site. The large green space on the eastern portion is a stormwater retention area. There's a water reclamation system built in that filters the water after it's been used, and so it can be recycled, cleaned and recycled, and so there's not such a drain on the water supply system. And then the other portion of this is that there will be a considerable amount of landscaping on the site along the frontage of Oklahoma Avenue, as well as the other perimeters of the site. The architecture is primarily brick with some concrete masonry units. That's the CMU split-face block. And there will be windows on all 4 sides of the building, garage doors on either end, and the metal standing roof on portions of the building. So Plan Commission has recommended approval. It's been published and publicly noticed. There have been no objections to date. And the nearest residential to this site is over 300 feet to the west, and that shouldn't be audible. The vacuums when you're leaving the site are on the east end of the site here. So typically when you drive through the site, this door either closes or it's far enough away. So most of the sound area will be on this eastern exposure, not on the west, and the residential is again over 300 feet to the west. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions from the council?
Mayor Devine?
Alderman Weigel. We're gonna let Marty start this one.
We're teaming up. Steve, you and I talked about this a little bit. I'm wondering about hours of operation. Is it 8 p.m.?
Yes, 8 p.m. Daily.
I'm wondering about site security after they close. We've already had one warm weekend with Highway 100 cruisers and issues in the lots. I'm just concerned. And if I understand correctly, those vacuums are free to use.
Yeah, you don't.
So
need
you
to
don't
have
need to be a customer to go there to vacuum out your car,
right.
Which I like. Not that I'm not going to go to the car wash, but so that's going to be free and open to the public. So conceivably, you could, spill your Culver's fries or whatever and go hang out there. And we talked a little bit about a gate, and I'm not a big fan of that. But I was wondering if we need to address that later, could we? Because this is a conditional use permit. If it becomes a nuisance because they're not managing the property correctly, we could essentially force them.
And the ownership, I'm not sure if the ownership's here, but we have spoke with the owner of this site, and they're not opposed to putting up a gate and monitoring that situation if it does become a problem.
Okay, yeah, and I wanted to commend both our staff and the owner of the developer, because this isn't what it looked like originally. You guys came to an agreement, something that I think fits with the neighborhood much better, so I'm very hopeful it's going to go well. But again, this cruising thing, we can't encourage it, so, thank you.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Weigel. Any other questions from the council?
Mayor Devine?
Alderman Halverson?
Steve, can you explain the retention pond a little bit more, and like how it filters the water, and does that go back to the city? Does it go back to the car wash?
Sure. So there's two things. There's a stormwater management system, so runoff from the site, when it rains or heavy storm event like today, it will run off and be captured within catch basins on the site and then transferred. That will be, instead of being shot back to the watershed right away, it'll be transferred to this retention pond on the east side of the site, where it can naturally attenuate into the ground and stay in this watershed instead of just being shot off down to Lake Michigan right away. So the other thing is that with the water reclamation system for the car wash, the water that they use within their car wash, a portion of that is reclaimed, it's filtered, cleaned, and then used again within their system, so that it reduces their cost and water use as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, are there any questions on this item from the members of the audience? All right, seeing none, we will close public hearing number 3. And I will ask the clerk to read out public hearing number 4, item 6.
Conditional use permit for Panera Bread, a proposed restaurant at 3020 South 108th.
Thank you. Mr.
So after
Scher.
you get your car wash, this is the old Southtown Theater on the site of where Panera is wanting to locate. And the Southtown Shopping Center's evolved quite a bit over time. And the building where Panera wants to locate used to be Southtown Tire and Auto. Southtown Tire and Auto moved to the very north end of the center, and the Southtown, the theater that we saw in that previous shot is now gone and replaced with other restaurants, Fujiyama, the Southtown Tire and Auto. There's a popcorn store. There's tanning area, the Krispy Kreme on the corner. So there's been quite a bit of investment in this site over the years. The owner, as well as a representative of Panera, are here this evening. So we're excited to see a Panera come to the city. They're going to be located in the very southwest corner of this site. And this is the building, and the portion of the site is going to be, or portion of the building is going to be about 2,500 square feet. And there will be another tenant space created within the building for a future tenant to be determined. The zoning is C4, commercial, and restaurants are otherwise permitted as limited uses. But the reason why we're here this evening is because Panera wants to do 2,500 square feet. So because of that additional amount of square footage, that's the reason why we have to post the public hearing and come before council. So this is the way the zoning ordinance is currently set. So the cafe, the use can be cafe style dining, fast casual with prepackaged foods, warmed for serving. 23 customer seats for patrons will be inside the building. No alcohol, it's carry-out service provided, and no drive-through is proposed, or outdoor seating. We've encouraged Panera to give some consideration to outdoor dining sometime in the future, but we're happy that they're here. So it apparently doesn't fit with their current business model for this smaller variety of Panera store. The hours of operation are daytime hours, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and 7 days a week. And this is going to be Panera's first prototype of this smaller, fast casual variety. The areas in gold here or yellow are the public-facing portion of the store. As you come in to the building on this northwest corner, you come through a vestibule, and there will be seating to your left, as well as a service counter, and there will be restrooms, and then everything in gray is the back of house where they prepare store food, and an office area. And this is a new tenant space yet to be determined who moves in there. The overall site plan, just a closer look at the Panera portion of it, features a walkway out to Highway 100. There'll be a new set of steps or a ramp that is built into the retaining wall to tie into the city sidewalk along Highway 100. Connectivity is a big part of our Highway 100 corridor plan. Behind the building is the existing refuse location. There's some maintenance, some cleanup that's going to be involved in that, just to sort of give some touch-ups to that. But otherwise, 9 parking stalls are shown on the property. There will be a bicycle parking stall either on the front of the building or near this parking stall here, near that walkway up to the building. They're going to be doing a poured curb to replace wheel stops along Highway 100, and otherwise just removing a damaged fence behind the property back here next to the Chuck E. Cheese property. There's a leaning damaged fence that'll be removed from the site. And this is just sort of cross-access, views of the site, cross-access between the shopping center in the corner and the Southtown Shopping Center will be maintained. These curb stops will be replaced with a poured curb, landscaping. The refuse enclosure, the effervescence on that will be cleaned up and maintained. The fence back here is going to be completely removed. A new guardrail will be installed to create that buffer or barrier between the two properties, this being a separate property over here. And the south side of the building will actually be repainted as well. But these are the elevations. Really, just some paint changes to the upper facade above the awnings, and the awnings will remain. They're in good shape, and new signage will be added. And there's the north elevation. So it's been published, and notice has been served. Plan Commission has recommended approval, and no objections to date. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Before we go to questions, I just want to let everybody know that we're watching the weather, and there was a tornado warning west and south of us in Elkhorn, Lake Geneva, Delavan, and there's severe thunderstorms coming our way. So if everybody's phones start going off with weather alerts, I just want to let everybody know that you're going to get to spend intimate time with your elected officials in the basement, which will be down the stairs, which are right through the entrance, and then into the hallway. So let's hope we don't get there. Okay. Kale and Melinda will help with traffic flow if we need to go. So want to let everybody know. Yeah, so make your questions brief. No. Any questions from the council on this public hearing? You don't have to be that brief. Okay, any questions from the members of the audience on this public hearing? All right, seeing none, we will close our 4th public hearing, and we will go to public hearing number 5, and I will ask the clerk to read out that.
Special event permit and zoning exception request for Novak Manor, a proposed temporary event space located at 9730 West Montana Avenue.
Thank you. Mr. Scher?
Thanks, Mayor. This is a unique offering that's before us this evening as part of a special event permit. Now, normally when someone has a special event, they apply for the permit, and in some occasions it may rise to the level of requiring a public hearing. And this is one such case. In fact, perhaps the first case in the city of West Allis. So we thank the NOACs for applying, and we'll share what they've shared with us as far as the application. So the overview of this is that the Novak Manor, it's a single-family home, the majority of the year. However, on 10 days of the year, it becomes a haunted property. So in October, the City Council passed an ordinance and which allowed for a special zoning exception to hear these types of unique situations. They operate typically on a temporary basis, and the public hearing on this event permit is the outlet to sort of consider, is this appropriate for the neighborhood? Should the city allow this to go forward? The property is zoned RA2, which is a low-density residential district, and an event theater space, which is typically a commercial entity, is not allowed in a low-density residential district. So that's the purpose for this hearing requirement, to sort of learn about the facts and the Novak Manor and what they do and how they're going to do it safely within the neighborhood. It is a local attraction. It draws thousands of people during that 10 days of operation. It is indoor and outdoor. Now, by indoor, meaning inside of a tent and portion of a garage, but otherwise it's primarily an outdoor event that people walk to or drive to the area and walk up and then either view it from the street, or they can, if they're brave, they can walk through the actual property itself and be scared by, actors that play the role. So there is an operational plan. We'll get into that next. And the site plan that's been shared here by the NOACs, shows in gray the permanent structures of the garage and the residence. Now, the residence again is off limits to event goers. That is their private residence. But the tent areas and the garage, portion of the garage area, or actually the garage area, is part of the scare. And the arrows that you see on here are sort of the route. When you enter the property, in the lower portion here is Montana Avenue, and the western part is 98th Street. So they have a corner lot, and people stage along the sidewalk area, and then are brought in phases by a gatekeeper, and then they can walk through along the path and through the site and get scared along the way, and then where they exit. There is an appropriate limit of how many people can enter the site at one time, but they do see thousands of people throughout their event. It is a temporary occupancy, so this is not a year-round attraction. It's not a year-round ask from the Novaks, and they're just really looking to continue to support, seek community support and the council support of their activities that they've hosted for several years, if not more. And it has some sort of drawn more attention as it's grown lately, and the city drew up the question and created the ordinance to create this platform for this public hearing this evening. A couple other important facts. You can see the dates of the special event each Friday and Saturday, September 27th through October 26th, inclusive of the 27th of September and October 26th, and then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. There will be no makeup dates for bad weather. Food, transient merchants, alcohol are prohibited from the special event premise. And this is an annual ask, so each year, this is the start of this permit year, and then next year they'll have to come back and apply again and come back for a similar public hearing. So this has been published, notice has been served, we have received feedback to date. The feedback I received has been very, very positive in nature. I'm not saying that there could be people out there that are opposed to this, but I guess I didn't receive that communication. Everything I've received has been very positive. Some of the examples of that are, below, and I just wanted to share that. So I'll open it up for questions and comments. Thanks.
Mayor Devine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alderwoman Grisham.
Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. I just want to make note and let the community know, as well as my colleagues here, how wonderful staff and the Novaks work together. I was part of that meeting, and this is a classic example on how this marriage can work very well between city and residents when they want to have an event, or just communication factors. I know that there were concerns with residents in the area, and the Novaks have been wonderful, as well as staff, in ironing out any of the details, making sure that this will be a safe, fun event, well-attended, and managed well. So I just want to thank the staff for going above and beyond, and the Novaks for being very patient in the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Mayor Devine? So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is less directed for Steve and maybe for Novak Manor itself. So overwhelmingly, the feedback I've heard has been positive, but for anyone who's got concerns, can you maybe walk us through how you've worked with neighbors to put concerns at ease or solve problems? I think it's important to show that, hey, you guys are willing to work.
Thank you. My name is Adam Novak. I am a partial owner of 9730 West Montana. We have spoke to some of the neighbors, and over the past few years, we've tried to make as many concessions as we see possible. One of them, which is here today, had issues with the amount of traffic from people exiting and entering their vehicles and slamming doors. So we have asked all our actors to park in front of her house, so that way there's not as much traffic, at least directly in front of her property, being that she's worried about that, which we can totally understand. We have also spoke to another gentleman that lives fairly close, and past years we actually had the line just completely go down the block. Same thing, he didn't want that, so we have it now zigzag so it all stays just in front of our property, obviously except for people parking and coming and going. And then we have also told him that we would be more than happy to add extra security over there, just to, again, make sure that everything stays calm, even though we've had no issues that at least have ever been presented to us of any vandalism or fights or anything like that. We definitely want to make sure that we keep that at bay, and we are absolutely more than willing to always hear the neighbors' concerns and do anything we can to try to appease both parties.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council?
Mayor Devine?
Alderman Weigel.
Steve mentioned that they're not doing any food and beverage sales, but my question is, what would stop somebody with a food truck licensed by the city from saying, hey, on weekends, there's a crowd over here, I'm going to park my food truck there? I mean, do we wait for that to become a problem, or do we just do a temporary ban on food trucks in the neighborhood there? I'm just throwing it out there.
I didn't think food trucks were allowed on residential.
On residential
Park-
streets? They're not allowed on residential streets?
Not for more than 1 hour. I'm sorry, I didn't ask for
Okay.
more.
So like the little the popcorn or the little ice cream vendor who drives around would be okay, but nobody could, taco truck could. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, are there any questions, comments from the members of the audience?
Hello, I'm Dylan Krivershine, 9705 West Montana Avenue. I'd like to thank the Common Council for this opportunity to be here tonight. I'd like to start by saying that I am not opposed to the event or everything that it stands for in the NOVAX and the BACS. I truly commend you guys for all the countless hours of effort that you put into this event. Having said that, I do have some concerns with the downstream impact. I am one of the neighbors that haven't had the pleasure to talk to you guys, but open to having conversations in the future here. Concerns with the major traffic jams between 96th and 99th Street. I saw on the slide here that, you know, there's thousands of people coming into this event, and it's on one specific corner, so that does bring concerns to me. We had our driveway blocked at one point last year, and when we happened to knock on that person's door, they rolled down their window and we got a big whiff of marijuana. This person was very intoxicated and proceeded to move their vehicle, which is a safety concern for us. I see that food is prohibited and alcohol, but it still finds its way into our yards. So with that, I do appreciate the extra security that you did mention. That does alleviate some concerns there with the volunteers preventing some of the blocked driveways. However, we have found people urinating on our property and coming onto our property. Somebody was looking through my truck at one point, so just extra unwanted behavior there. Just to recap, we're not opposed to the event itself, just have a couple minor concerns that I hope are addressed, and again, open to having some conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to address the council under this item?
Good evening. My name is Gary Fleischman. My address is 9704 West Montana. It's 2 doors up from Novak Manor. A couple of concerns that I've had for a couple of years, and they do not seem to be being addressed to my satisfaction. So I just wanted to go through a couple things that I think could be improved. Again, we're not against their charities whatsoever. This is the things that go on the kind of perimeter areas here where nobody is really watching. As our neighbors mentioned there's problems with public urination, blocked driveways. As you know, during October, we get a lot of leaves that are coming off. We're all raking leaves. We have to rake leaves into the street. And when we have big piles of leaves, cars like to park on top of these leaves, which can be a fire hazard. You also mentioned the urination that's going on. I see that quite often. I'm 2 doors up from the manor. That's something that should be addressed. There's other things like they mentioned before, people looking in and testing car doors on private property. We don't want that. I almost hit a beer bottle with my lawnmower because people are throwing beer bottles in our lawns. I had a person break a tree limb off of one of my trees. That was 2 years ago. Dumping garbage from their cars. As they open their car door to get out, they dump garbage right into the street. Alcohol consumption, beer bottles again that we find. And I guess I would like to try some solutions, maybe some suggestions that would help them out a little bit. Number one would be a porta potty someplace on their property. If they could also have what I call a sidewalk monitor, where they have people walking around the sidewalks, you know, on each side of Montana from 97th to 99th, that would probably cure a lot of these problems as well. Clean up the streets after the events. A lot of times I go out right after the event and I pick up several garbage bags full of garbage. I think it's important to pick it up as soon as the event is over, because a lot of times it gets windy, the trash gets blown around the neighborhood. And along that thought, we could also have some garbage cans placed strategically on each side of the street, you know, so they have like 6 garbage cans around. That would help a lot. Increased police presence, I don't know if that's possible or not. If the police could be there like for a meet and greet, or I don't know if they have the McGruff Grime Dog, if they have that anymore or not, but that would be something that would be nice to have there. So basically that's it. Those are my complaints. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Mary Trudell, and my address is 9800 West Montana Avenue in West Allis. I'd like to make 3 points regarding Novak Manor. Number 1, Patty and Adam and their family, as neighbors, are lovely people. In Wisconsinese, they are good people. If I needed assistance, I could ask, and they would help. So this is definitely not about them as neighbors. My second point is that, which Patty is aware, I don't support the haunted house. I tolerate it. I understand in those who really like Halloween, it makes people happy to see these decorations, and Patty and Adam donate to charities. In reference to point 1, Patty and Adam are very respectful to immediate concerns I have had regarding the haunted house. To provide examples, one year, there were bubbles flying out from a cauldron and popping on my house and garage. I spoke with Patty and Adam, and they moved the cauldron to the other side of their house. Patty ensures their cars and friends' cars are parked on the east side of my house on 98th Street, as Adam alluded to prevent people from parking there, and so they aren't walking on the main part of my yard. They have redirected lights that were shining into my home, turned off persistent squeaky things, and took pictures off Facebook where my home was in the background, and I did not give permission for my home to be on Facebook. I come to my third point, which concerns safety. Initially, there were just regular Halloween decorations in the yard, and when they moved in, we said, oh, they must be Halloween people. As this venue has become more interactive, however, there are some safety measures in place, but the crowd they are drawing has outgrown the residential space and requires additional security and safety plans if the city approves the haunted house to continue. I'll first address parking. My tipping point was last October when I needed to get medicine for my grandson at Target. There were cars parked on both sides of the street on Montana Avenue. People were walking in the middle of the road. Cars were trying to get in onto Montana while I was trying to get out of my own subdivision. And when I was at the stop sign trying to turn right onto 99th Street, I was blocked from turning right. There is no way an emergency response vehicle could get through. This can't be compared to Candy Cane Lane, as fire trucks and ambulances come through and there is room. If the haunted house is approved to continue, there needs to be a solid plan in place regarding parking. Patty has suggested shuttles or one-side parking only. To address additional concerns, I have had people knocking on my front door, asking to use the bathroom in my home. I direct them to the gas station. Now I don't answer the door. There is garbage in my yard, and my winter snow sticks have been moved to all different locations in my yard. All of the yard waste that I have placed in the curb in the fall was thrown back into my yard, which required me to rake it all back into the street. I did speak with Patty and Adam, and they do try to address these issues right away, but it is a challenge with the amount of people attending. I will say that I do have a baseline level of stress through that whole season with the amount of people that are coming through the neighborhood. In terms of security, they do have security-type people walking around, but with the amount of people attending, there is a concern of escalated violence. I am not one to what if, but it is something to consider in the current day and age. If Novak Manor is allowed to continue by the city, there needs to be a plan for security trained to address escalated violence situations. My purpose in presenting this evening is not to promote shuttering Novak Manor. However, my purpose is to provide my concerns, and if the city moves forward to approve them to continue, that strong plans for safety and crowd control would need to be in place, as well as follow-up to ensure those plans are sustained and followed. Thank you for the time to present this information to the Common Council.
Thank you very much.
Everybody knows who I am. I'm Tracy Stefanski, 1982 South 75th Street, former alderman who helped work out the ordinance for Novak Manor to exist, and worked with Kale on the permit stuff before I was no longer an alderman. I gotta say, the things that I just heard are absolutely ridiculous. I can show you Ring videos from the Ring app of people publicly urinating in people's alleys, yards, all over the city. I can show you Ring videos of people checking cars in the middle of the night, in the daytime. I had somebody on my Ring camera check my vehicle in my driveway, broad daylight, 4:10 in the afternoon. So, the issues that you're bringing up are citywide. The issues that you are bringing up also fall under Candy Cane Lane and also fall under State Fair, because parking around the city for State Fair for 11 days is absolutely ridiculous. I was at Novak Manor one night when an ambulance came through, and that ambulance got through on the street, no problem. What these people do is raise money for charity They help this community. They make this community a better place. And anybody on this council that votes against it, you should be ashamed of yourself. I've heard older people going around the city or their district going to people and talking bad about Novak Manor. Yes, I have many friends around this city still, and they contact me. I have a binder that thick of support for Novak Manor. So I think you need to do what's right, because if you don't, then you need to go after Candy Cane Lane, and you need to go after what happened at State Fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on public hearing number 5?
My name is Jamie Donald. My address is 1423 Greenwing Terrace. I actually live in Waukesha. I work with the Novaks tirelessly planning this event for 10 days, 40 hours. I will say this, we've never, ever had a police issue. You can look up the address, you can look it up. We've never had to call the police. We've never had the police there. We've never even had an altercation in the line that we've had to escalate it to a situation we couldn't handle and just tell people to leave. It doesn't ever happen. As far as garbage goes, I personally have walked the line. This year was new for me. I like to act more than I like to walk the line. I work security this year, garbage all night long. We are picking it up in the night. We're not saving it for the next day. We're not saving it for Monday night. We're doing it immediately. I'm picking it up as we're standing there watching and talking to the people in line. I also want to clarify the thousands of people, because that number sounds overwhelming. We are not seeing thousands of people a night. That's not how many people we see. That's not how they come. It also depends on the weather. We also cut the line off to be completely respectful to the neighbors so that we are done at 10 o'clock. People get a little upset with us if at 9:15 I tell them, sorry, we can't take any more tonight. They understand though. I tell them to come back the next weekend. We're not gonna upset the neighbors and stay open until 11. I think we could, don't know the rules, but we don't. 10 o'clock, that's the cutoff. And by 10:15, when all of our actors and everybody are done changing, you go outside and there is nothing going on out there. It is quiet, the lights are off, it's pitch black again after the garbage is picked up. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on public hearing number 5, item 7?
Mayor Devine? Sorry,
Yes.
I know we're back in the
Alderwoman Nowlan,
citizen
go ahead.
portion. Can I have a point of clarification? So this seems very similar to Candy Cane Lane. Does Candy Cane Lane have to go through the same permitting process? Cal question.
Oh, sorry, I thought Attorney Decker was going to get up to answer your question.
Hey, I'm sorry.
This is a new permit, so the question was, does Candy Cane Lane go through this same process?
So
They did.
So there's two processes at place. Number one is it's a special event. So yes, Candy Cane Lane and Novak Manor are both looking for a special event permit. The question is whether you need a zoning exception. And that's what this hearing is here for, is the zoning exception portion of it. Since the public is invited onto the premises, onto private property, that normally wouldn't be allowed in a residential property because it becomes an event space. So in Candy Cane Lane's case, if they're going to invite people onto private property, they would have to go through the same process because that's also residentially zoned. If they are not inviting people onto their private property and it's all staying in the right-of-way, there wouldn't be a zoning issue and they would just use a special event permit only.
Okay, so the difference is the explicit invitation onto property, even though there are folks walking through Candy Cane Lane, because it's not an explicit, hey, come on private property and look at this. They're not subject to the same.
You're touching on the gray area, and that is acquiescence and invitation.
Okay.
And so that would have to be a fact-based inquiry depending on what happens.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I haven't been
appreciate
to
it.
observe it, so I don't know, but I would have to get a report of it and have to review it.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mayor Devine.
Thank you.
Sorry, one question for Kale.
Yes.
Regarding what she just kind of touched on. So when people post cutouts in their yard for Candy Cane Lane, or they have the chairs with Santa and Mrs. Claus, they would then have to apply for this special public hearing as well?
So if it's set up in a way where it invites people onto their property, then it would be an issue where, yes, I would say you're implying that you should invite people on your property, and that's a zoning issue.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Amy Rose Murphy, 1520 South 76th Street. A couple things. One, just walking Candy Cane Lane, that's one of the areas where I got my signatures. I would say about a third of those homes invite people onto their property. So if this is a really big gray area. I am not someone that celebrates Halloween at all, but I did visit this year due to the things that were going on and the complaints. And the one thing I will say, I've had so many people tell me in the course of running for mayor, they talked to me about Novak Manor. And I did not realize the extents that they go, the lengths that they go to for kids that have special needs so that they get a Halloween experience. Not many people do that. And you know, we live on 76th Street. People pee in our yard all the time. I hate to admit it. I mean, last year, I mean, granted, we're new to that house, but we chose that house knowing where it was. And after the state fair, I was like, holy crap. But you know what? It's 11 days or whatever long it is. It's not the entire year. And it's for a good cause, right? Cheese curds, fried pickles, and everything else. So we can handle it. And I can understand and I can appreciate the people that live in both Candy Cane Lane and the people that live around Novak Manor. And one point I do want to mention, anyone can take a picture of anybody or anybody's house outside because it's public and nobody needs their permission, okay? So again, I agree with Tracy. I looked on my ring. We see lots of things that happen all the time. I have the church across the street that on Wednesdays, they have very needy families that come. And you know what? If they need to, you know, do stuff or whatever, I'm worried. Are they gonna break in? No, I'm not worried, but it's kind of like, okay, they're questionable, some people. But it's okay, they're in need, I get it. Sometimes people come over and they talk to Quentin and I, and they just want to feel human again. Novak Manor, we have to get to a point where we are not over-governing everything we do in this city. People live here for a reason, and we have freedoms and things to do with our own property, and I get it, this is a zoning thing. But we cannot nitpick every single thing because no one will end up wanting to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the public hearing or comments from the audience? All right. We will close our fifth and final public hearing, and we will now go on to Section F of our agenda is public participation. This is where the council may receive information from members of the public during this 30-minute period. We again ask each speaker to announce their name and address and sign in at the podium and limit their comments to one statement of no more than 5 minutes. We cannot take action on the topics raised by the speakers. Does anybody wish to address the council under public participation this evening? Oh, could you turn the mic on, please? Push the... There we go. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Newak. I live at 1601 South 100th Street in West Dallas. I am just coming tonight to ask the board to consider drafting an ordinance to allow chickens in our community. Our neighboring communities already have ordinances that allow this. In Milwaukee since 2011, in Wauwatosa since 2013, Greenfield, New Berlin, they all have ordinances allowing chickens. They're a great benefit as far as composting household waste, and if kept well, they produce for your family and give that farm to table experience, and it's a wonderful thing that everybody should be able to do. So thank you for hearing me.
Thanks very much.
Hi, Amy Rose Murphy, 1520 South 76th Street. So a second issue I hadn't planned on talking about tonight is I totally support chickens. And there's actually legislation that they are trying to pass. And I think it would behoove the city to work with residents before something is implemented in statute. Now, what I wanted to talk about tonight is I would love for at the next meeting, I'm not sure how many of the aldermen are aware, I'm sure Dan and Rebecca are aware, that we have an issue at our water reservoir. We have 4 pumps, and 4 pumps that pump all the water through the pipes that come through from Milwaukee that go into the homes of the residents, these pumps and filters. There's one that is broken. It's been broken for over a year and a half. It would cost about $200,000 to replace this. There is a second pump that is not strong enough to handle with all 3 pumps on, or if they just try to use 2 pumps because there's a whole technology to it. So my understanding is the best thing is to have 2 pumps going, and they usually want that smaller one and the larger one, and that second one will at some point stop working. And I'm concerned because that's our drinking water. We're talking about lead pipes. What about our reservoir and the pumps that get the water to the homes? The second thing is every, I believe, 10 years or so, the reservoirs have to be cleaned out. And there's a 2-part process. And my understanding is this is the year that we're doing it. And I also understand that we put a bid out and we're hiring a contract company to do it, when I don't understand where one part we have staff that know how to do it, and that would save us money. We're constantly talking about the money we don't have. We need to look at the people and the skills and certifications that the current city employees do have and do what we need to do in-house versus constantly contracting out. So I have grave concerns about this pump. So I would like at the next meeting for DPW to come and share with all of us in the community what is happening with that pump, because I'm pretty diligent about looking on the website, and I haven't seen anything there discussing this. I could be wrong, and maybe I overlooked it, but I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to address the council under public participation this evening? All right, we will close public participation and we will move on to item G. Our standing committees will be meeting during recess. Please note that the room numbers are listed on page 2, so if you are here for a license or a permit of some type and you're not sure which room to go to, please stop one of us when we break for recess and we'll get you in the right direction. Moving on to item H, the mayor's report. I just have a few quick things. On the 26th, we had an Arbor Day celebration with forestry at Jefferson Elementary. Alderwoman Noling and Alderman Halverson and I were there helping a couple of classes plant a tree and talking about the importance of trees in our community. Really nice event at the school. And I also just want to take a moment to recognize a couple of weeks that we are celebrating. It is National Nurses Week as well as Teacher Appreciation Week. So I just want to take a minute to thank especially the nurses, not especially the nurses, but specifically the nurses, because really they impact us, everybody in some way at some point in our lives, and the services that they provide are valuable. And I think the same can be said for teachers. And, you know, at this point in the year, I just want to remind teachers that summer's almost here. Just hang in there for those final few weeks. That does conclude the mayor's report. Are there any alderpersons' reports?
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Halverson.
So we have a, I don't know if you know, West Dallas, West Milwaukee has the Suburban Singers, their choir group. My wife may or may not be on it. But this year's their 40th season, and they have their 40th anniversary concert this Friday at Dotke. It's at 7:30. You can get tickets in advance for $7. If you're at the door, it's $8, and then you have to deal with me because I'm taking tickets. But I'm going to ask if Alder Noling can put the information online, so if you want to find tickets to pre-order. My daughter's also singing it too, so everybody clap. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other alderpersons' reports this evening?
Mayor Dan.
Yeah.
Just want to remind folks with the severe weather that you can sign up through the city website for AlertSense, and they will text you and email you the alerts. I know that I got my alerts for the severe thunderstorm warning and just felt like it was a timely reminder of that service.
Great, thank you. Any other reports from the alderpersons this evening? All right.
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Haas.
I move for approval of the minutes of our April 23rd Common Council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Were there any corrections to the minutes? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, the minutes are approved. We have no standing committee reports this evening.
And Mayor Devine.
Alderman Haas.
Regarding the consent agenda, Ms. Grill has one thing to bring our attention to on item 34.
Item 34 should reference the Southwest Suburban Health Department, not the West Allis Board of Health, since we just combined, so.
Thank you. And so with that, are there any alderpersons who wish for separate action on any items on the consent agenda? And seeing none, I move for approval of the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
Okay, if there is no discussion, please, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderperson Haas.
Aye.
Halverson.
Aye.
Keen. Aye. Novak.
Aye.
Noling. Aye. Rote.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Grobe.
Aye.
10 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries.
And Mayor Devine.
Alderman Haas.
I move that the council stand in recess until the conclusion of our committee meetings.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in recess.